vibe, baby.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe. And before we get started, I just want you to know if you are struggling right now, you are not alone. Please don't suffer in silence. I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Jason M. Jason's been sober since August 13th, 2015. He's a single father whose 12-year-old son is his absolute world. After struggling to relate in the rooms early on, Jason didn't walk away, he leaned in. Jason started Young People's Meeting in his own home, made a bold move to Las Vegas, and rebuilt his foundation from the ground up. Today, he has a sponsor and a home group that's giving him an entirely new experience with the 12 steps. Rooted in a deep relationship with God and the belief that a higher power restored him to sanity. I'm looking forward to learning more about Jason's story. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing all right, Joe. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How's Las Vegas treating you today?
It's been absolutely beautiful. We're starting to warm up out here. It's been a pretty interesting winter in the middle of the desert. You know, we had snow a couple of days ago. You know, last week there was snow on the mountains, so that was like a first in 8 years. So, you know, I moved out here to be warm, and you know, it's cold, and I'm like, you know, waiting for the shorts and t-shirt weather like today. You know, I'm like, okay, here we go. You know?
Yeah, I get it. When I first moved to Tennessee, they told me that it doesn't snow and we don't get tornadoes where I'm at. And the first year I was here, we had the blizzard of 93, and in the spring we had a tornado rip through the freaking area. I was like, somebody lied to me.
It's a trick. It's a trick.
Anyway, so tell me, what was it like growing up, Jason?
So I'm from a town called Lancaster and Palmdale in Southern California. It's a small town. It's really, you know, it was a lot of nothingness. You know what I mean? It was very boring and relaxed town. It was very small. It's very easy to learn. You know, it's ABC and up. You know what I mean? And then 1, 2, and 10. You know, to 100 Street East to 100 Street West. So it was very, you know, easy to learn your way around the place, you know, and it was, like I said, a quiet and slow paced place, especially compared to Las Vegas, you know, and it was about 45 minutes to an hour away from Los Angeles. You know, there wasn't a lot to do out there. You know, if you didn't ride dirt bikes or work on a farm and have animals and stuff like that, like, or, you know, have bicycles and skateboards and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't like you were probably an indoor kid. You know, I grew up on a private dirt road in a dirt neighborhood. You know, there was no curbs and light posts. You know, it was just dirt. You know what I mean? People didn't drive down our street in the middle of the night. My parents left their front door unlocked and their cars unlocked with their keys in the cup holders my whole entire life, pretty much until I started becoming an alcoholic, you know, and a drug addict, you know, and they started locking up because of me, you know, and it's actually a trip to think about that, you know, like, especially the way the world is today. But it was a nice place to grow up. You know, it was very, very peaceful, and you know, at nighttime it gets super dark in that neighborhood, and you can see the stars. And my mom and dad enjoyed that. You know what I mean? They would go out on their front yard, and my dad would barbecue something, and they would stay out there and talk and just watch the stars, and yeah, that's what that town was nice for, you know.
What was like what was your earliest attitude like towards alcohol and drugs? Was it like common in your area or
So my dad, I'm an AA baby. I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous, me and my brother. I grew up giving my dad got sober 5 years before I was born, or 3 to 5 years before I was born. He got sober, I think probably like, or maybe, yeah, maybe it was less than that. Um, I know he passed away with like 24 years. Um, so I think he was like about 3 years sober before I did. My brother's 5 years older than me, and so he got sober a little bit after my brother was born. And so I grew up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was wonderful. I didn't know anything when I was younger, and when I was a little kid, it was like, all these old guys smoking cigarettes and hanging out. And there's some of them were bikers and some of them were cowboys, you know what I mean? And they drove hot rods and pickup trucks, and they gave me cake, you know what I mean? Or they would have like candy there, and I would hang out at these AA halls and eat cake, you know what I mean? Like they had birthday cake almost every single time I was there, and my dad had a sponsor, and he used to have a men's stag hot dog night. And it's funny because it was on this guy's ranch, um, and his ranch was like 5 to 7 acres, and like he had peacocks, and we would try to find the peacocks and we would just run around. There's like wild barn kittens, and he had like Great Pyrenees dogs that would just follow you around, and it was just a good time. We would go to the Halloween and Christmas dances and Thanksgiving parties. My mom would always cook like 3 to 4 turkeys every Thanksgiving for the AA halls to feed healthy people. And eventually my dad started working 12-step program with his sponsor and sponsoring people. And this is where like things kind of started changing. As I was probably about like 10, 11 years old, and on the weekends my dad he would be home from work. He was a truck driver, so he was gone during the week, and then he would come home on the weekends to spend time with us. And Saturdays. One day was always dedicated to him doing like meetings and doing step work, and it just really made me upset. I didn't understand it, and all I knew is there was a whole bunch of drunks that I didn't really have a relationship with that were in my front yard, and my dad would be drinking coffee and doing 12-step work with these guys all day long. My dad was one of those chatty Cathys that like you get him going and he's just like telling you a story about a story about a story that has a story in it, that's somehow supposed to help you, and so like he would just be doing stuff, and I would want my dad's attention. My dad was like my hero, and he was my rock star in my life growing up. And I just wanted to play with my pops, and he would be hanging out with these drunks, and I didn't understand why. Um, and so like from like the age of like 10 to probably about 12, I started becoming like resentful at that. You know what I mean? Like that was like my first resentment, as I looked at the work, and it was like, wow, you know what I mean? Like, oh, all right, you know? And so that's how my like relationships kind of like ended and started with, Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. My mom would go to Al-Anon meetings, and me and my brother would participate in Alateen. I always forget that I did that, like it's not, because you're just hanging out with a whole bunch of other drunks, kids, you know what I mean? Just having a good time. And, that, and you think that like when I got older, I became such a, introvert of like not liking people and not wanting to be around other human beings, you know what I mean? Especially while I was getting loaded. Um, like I was a social drinker, but I was also a person that was like, after I realized that I can't trust you, I want to be away from you, and so, but as a child, like we would have like actual like Alateen meetings, and we would talk about subjects, and like that's where I like got my first pack of cigarettes, and you know what I mean. It's like you start finding like cute girls that talk to, and you're like, oh, hey, you're fucked up like me. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you got issues like me too. And they had this thing. It's called SCAC. It was like Southern California Alateen Convention, and they would rent out Redlands College, like a whole entire dorm room for the girls, and then they would rent out a whole entire dorm room for the guys, and then they would have like balloon fights and like just like all these events and like a speaker meetings and like like therapy sessions and then like a dance on Saturday night and then everybody would go home on Sunday, and it was just like like kids are getting like piercing their ears and like their nipples and like there's no parents. There's like 18 and 19-year-old like sponsors are like watching these kids, and like these kids are pretty much just getting jacked up on like Mountain Dew and a Red Bull for like 48 hours straight. You know what I mean? Like just breeding future alcoholic and addicts. You know what I mean? Like, hey, like if you don't like the party after this, don't come back next year. And it was just such a blast. It was just such a blast. We would try to go every single year, and it was $150 back in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like parents were like, "There's a lot of money." You know what I mean? Like, I'll need to go sell some candy bars or some stuff. You know what I mean? To come up with that. But that was like the fun things that we did. Me and my brother was a part of that too, and that was super happy. Me and my brother, because we were such. I was a bad kid. I had red hair and freckles. I looked like Chucky. You know what I mean? Like I always felt separated. I had a cousin that was like in between my age and my brother's age, and he was like my best friend. And he had blonde hair and blue eyes. You know what I mean? And I wanted to be just like that guy. You know what I mean? Like he was just a handsome young boy. You know what I mean? And I was just like, man, like I got freckles, and grandma always tells me that they're angel kisses. You know what I mean? Like. And it's just embarrassing, you know what I mean? Like, so I felt like that feeling of, restless, irritable, and discontent as a child, and I truly don't believe that made me an alcoholic. I think that was just the way I felt, you know what I mean? I just didn't feel okay in my skin, and so, as growing up, like that's kind of like what, I continue to move in that direction of, thinking that I'm different, feeling that I was different, dying. Eventually I got to an age where my mom kind of gave me free will to dye my hair. And, I became like a punk rocker and a chameleon, like a lot of alcoholics do. I was trying to find my herd, you know what I mean? The people that were like me, and eventually I did. I found this neighborhood that had this kid, and this kid had a single mom who was a stripper, and his dad was a truck driver too. And so she just bought him everything that he wanted. You know what I mean? Like would buy him weed so he didn't have to leave the house, and didn't get him in trouble by catching it. So, like buying it so he didn't get caught and get any tickets. So she would buy it for him. We'd buy him dirt bikes and all these name brand clothes. You know what I mean? Like, but he didn't have a steady home. You know what I mean? Like he didn't have two loving parents at home and a brother. You know what I mean? Like I had, what is that? Like, like emotional stability, growing up. You know what I mean? Like it was, and you don't realize this stuff until like you're way older, and you're just like, wow, like I had a pretty good life. Why was I such an asshole? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody else we were talking about this the other day, and it's like that's the cool thing about like the steps and recovery and all that is we kind of get a new childhood because we look, once we look back, we can see, holy crap, man, I thought I was a tragedy, and everything was bad. I'm like, I was like, it was a gift, my childhood, really. I mean, I had issues like everybody, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting perspective. I do have to say, for any Alateens out there, they do not give free packs of cigarettes if you join Alateen. That is not, it's not one of the conditions. That's
So, or vape. Because vape would be the thing now. Like,
Oh, yeah, it's
let me
true.
get
Yeah.
it up your vape, man. You know,
No vapes.
have a community vape at the AA meeting, you know.
So do you remember the first time you felt the effects of alcohol or drugs?
I do. My dad's sister, my aunt Michelle came, and she was a truck driver too, and she brought a 6-pack of wine coolers, and I haven't seen a wine cooler in a long time. So I don't even know if they still make them. They probably do, but that was like Kool-Aid with vodka. You know what I mean? Like they were awesome. They were carbonated. It was like a soda pop. You know, it was delicious. It was fruit punch. You know what I mean? My cousin, he took one and I took one, um, and went out in the backyard and we chugged those things. We didn't even have to chug them. They were sweet and delicious and cold and I felt that warm feeling. You know what I mean? And immediately my mom like knew that something was wrong. You know what I mean? And she was like, "You guys can't drink these." And then, of course, my dad like lost. He was just like, "You can't come here no more if you're gonna bring alcohol into my house." You know what I mean? Like, my kid touches everything. You know what I mean? Like, he'd always try to tell me like, "Oh, you don't have fingers on the end of your hands, so look with your eyes, not with your hands." I like the way it made me feel. I didn't understand it though. I didn't understand it at all what it was doing to my body and my mind at that time. You know.
So when did it start escalating? Was it any time that
Yeah, there was a time where it escalated. So I was about 12 years old. So my dad pretty much told me and my brother like, "Hey, I'm an alcoholic." Explained to it as we got older, like this is why I do these things. I go to these meetings because I have an allergy of the body, an obsession of the mind. And one of you guys is most likely going to become an alcoholic. Like it's in your genes. It's probably going to happen. You know what I mean? And so like at this point, like 12 years old, like I'm trying to be independent. Like I'm cool. I got a group of badass little friends. You know what I mean? Like, look at me. Like, it's time for me to be the head of the household, at 12 years old, And so I'm like, my dad's an alcoholic. I'm going to be a pothead. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be a drug addict. You know what I mean? That will piss him off because I'm his little buddy and I'm going against the system, And so I start smoking weed with this kid, you know what I mean? Like, that was, I think, is my best friend, like that's where I really thrived for a long time. Like, I didn't really start touching alcohol like until I was like 16 years old, 15, 16 years old, because I started hanging out with Hispanic, like gangster guys. Because I always wanted to hang out with older people. It was like, you guys, for some reason, always had the best connections. You guys always had stuff that I wanted. You always, and if you didn't have it, you knew somebody that did have it, and that was important for me.
so you're 16, hanging out with the gangsters.
Yeah.
So what did at any time is it like, I might have a problem with this. Dad might have been right. Did that ever dawn on you or no?
No, not necessarily. My dad would drive through there next to our neighborhood was like a low income housing. And so my dad would just drive through the neighborhood, like, and he would find me with a group of people and like he would be like, "I'm gonna remember what your faces look like." And then like when I would like disappear, he would do it again and he would like catch those people like at the grocery store or like other places. And he'd be like, "I'm gonna call the cops on you if I see you with my kid." You know what I mean? Like he was trying to save my life before I didn't even know he was trying to save my life. He knew that, jail's institution and death was my only good options. You know what I mean? And I think he already experienced that stuff. And so he didn't want me to, and he was trying to save me of that. Did I think that I had a problem? I think that my parents had a problem that I didn't know I had a problem. I thought I was having a great time. And this stuff didn't make me, this stuff, I felt like always, it's like, I'm not hurting anybody. You know what I mean? Like I'm way over here away from the house. I'm not doing it in your house. Like I'm in a whole entire other housing tract. Like getting loaded. You know what I mean? Like, why are you bugging me? You know? And so that's how I felt really. Like if like I didn't understand like why they thought, and I was like, I'm not doing like hardcore drugs yet, you know? And so I'm like, I'm just smoking a little pot, man. Like, chill out, dude. You know?
Well, how did it escalate into the harder stuff, Jason?
Um, so so eventually my dad he broke his back twice and his neck twice while he worked for a company delivering newspapers, and he was driving trucks, and like he just got injured on loading docks. And so he's having these surgeries, and after he's having these surgeries, they're sending him home with 120 Vicodins and 120 Norcos, and you know like Dilaudid and fentanyl 24-hour patches eventually, and I'm running into these other kids that have stuff, and then they're like, oh, you might have these at your home too. You should look and see, you know what I mean? And I go into a medicine cabinet, and my dad's got the holy grail, the holy grail of opiates, and you know what I mean? Like I take 5 out of this bottle, 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 and I come to my buddy's house, and he's just like, dude, not only do you have money for the next week, like here's a whole bunch of weed. I'll trade you. You know what I mean? And I learned that certain people like I had this friend that was a girl, and her mom was like constantly having knee pain, and she was like, I'll buy them from you. Um, Anytime you have them. So now I have passive income, and I have another person that wants to give me weed for it. So it's like it's the most amazing thing. And that's how it kind of escalated until like one day I was like, oh, I'm gonna try one of these and see what the big deal is. You know what I mean? And so I took a Norco. That wasn't really my cup of tea, but my dad had Somas. And those were like the bee's knees. You know what I mean? Like those were amazing. They're a muscle relaxer. They weren't really like a hardcore narcotic. I don't think they were. I'm not sure, even today, but all I know is they made me feel like $1,000,000. They made me feel like I just drank a whole entire 12 pack of beer, you know what I mean? And I could just chill, and once again, it all goes back to like that ease and comfort I felt in my own skin. You know what I mean? Like I was cool. I didn't have red hair. I never had freckles in my life. You know what I mean? Who cares if I know how to skateboard? Who cares if I know how to ride a dirt bike? You know what I mean? Like, who cares that I have Payless shoes on? Like, nobody, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's kind of like I have arrived,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So were there moments when you tried to stop but couldn't? Or any of this?
I was probably about like 16, 17 years old. I even told, around then I stopped hanging out. Like I was going to these house parties, and everybody was, it was everybody was fighting. Like Lancaster School was fighting with Palmdale School, and everybody was brawling. And we were having caters and parties out in the middle of the desert. And there's a big ecstasy wave came through, and so I'm starting to do like hallucinogenics, mushrooms, acid, and all this stuff like that. It immediately progressed from like trying that pill to like, oh, this is awesome, like full flight. You know what I mean? Like go. You know what I mean? Like what else is there? Like I tried the whole entire smorgasbord. I realized I didn't like these two ones that were yellow. Let's try these white ones. Oh, the blue ones really do it. And you got a bag of magical mushrooms. Like let's eat them. You know what I mean? Like let's get this party started. You know what I mean? And so my mom's just like watching me turn into like this weirdo, you know what I mean? And she's just like, all right, well, you're grounded for a week. Like maybe you have a problem, and what brought me to that attention is my mom and dad were sleeping, and I broke through my parents' bedroom window and climbed through their window while they were in bed sleeping. And I fell on the floor, half intoxicated. And my dad like woke up, and he was like, what are you doing? I was just like, well, I'm gonna rob you. You know what I mean? Like I just told him the truth. I was like, I'm gonna rob you. I just broke out with my girlfriend, and I don't have anything to get fucked up right now, and I know you do. Like, so I'm gonna need you to give me some because I'm freaking out right now. And like, he like got up and like had this conversation of like with me, like, you're sick. You know what I mean? Like, and I understand where you're at, but like, I need these for medical reasons. You know what I mean? Like, you're taking from me because you don't have anything in the world, you know? And it's like, he's telling me all these truths, and I'm just like, man, like, all right, like, I guess I'm a drug addict. You know what I mean? Like, that's when I kind of like realized, like, oh, I might have a problem. You know what I mean? But like, I didn't want to accept that problem. You know, never. I was like, I'm having a good time. You know, I just feel like you guys don't like that I'm having such a good time. You know, um, that was like the first time that ever happened. Um, Later on, like a couple months later, I got introduced to heroin at a pretty young age. I was probably about 17 years old. And we were smoking. That's when like all these oxycontins and Roxy's and all that stuff started coming out, and people were, high school students are smoking them and eating them during high school, and then like somebody's just like, oh, this is heroin. You should try real heroin. You get twice as much for your money, And so like we found a guy that sells that, and so we start doing that stuff, and that is a whole entire other kind of beast in its own, and my mom catches me with the tinfoil and the straws, and I'm passed out on my bed, and she's pretty much like ghosting my phone at the time, and is like, oh, like, these are the 5 people that you've talked to in the last, hour. Um, you need to call them and let them know that you're going to rehab. You know what I mean? And my parents weren't going to send me to rehab. They're like, you're going to stay home. Like, that's not there. It's a rehab. They're like, we're going to be, on house arrest for like a month. And so I'm already going to like a charter high school where I only have to show up once a week, like, it's, I just do my test and come home, you know what I mean? Like, cause I can't stay in class I can't do normal high school at this point because I'm like, all I want to do is party. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even handle being on a campus for 6 hours because I'm so off the rails at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I gotta be home, or you gotta let me do whatever I want to do, because I said so. You know what I mean? Like, my life. My life by the time I was 17, 18 years old, was you know um, party central, and just go 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 go.
Yeah. And you're obviously, and you're having consequences,
Yeah,
at least out of school and home. And
yeah.
um, what was like the lowest point that you reached?
When I my lowest point that I reached. When do you mean, like in life,
Well,
or?
no, I mean, in this, like, as your addiction's progressing,
um, I think So my parents, probably about 18 at the point. You know what I mean? And my dad hires me and my cousin to pack up a 35-foot trailer and a 24-foot U-Haul with all of their stuff in that house, because I continuously rob and steal from them. And my dad does a geographic all the way up to Oregon. With my mom, because my mom's crying every single night, worried that I'm dead. I don't come home for weeks at it ends. I come home, take a shower, eat a hot meal. Um, my dad finds a house. He's like, I'm retired. I'm going to, God knows what's going to happen to me in the next 5 years, but I'm going to live somewhere that I love. You know what I mean? And he packs my mom up and that whole entire house. He gives me and my cousin $400 to do it each. You know what I mean? And we pack up these trucks with all the stuff my dad can't move. And they move. They leave. They leave California. You know what I mean? Like, and that's where like I hit my bottom, you know what I mean? Because I always had a place that I can come back to and fall on. That was gone. my dad had this trailer in his back, at the back of the property. It was like a motor home that was like just tore up from the floor up. Um, it was just full of trash and stuff like that. And me and my cousin cleaned out the part where the bed was. And, by this time, I'm 18 years old. You know what I mean? Like, I have a medical license for medical marijuana, like, because I made sure I can get that. So my parents couldn't yell at me for smoking weed because I'm like, I got ADHD and it helps me concentrate. You know what I mean? And my mom's just like, well, why do you pop pills? And, I'm like, I would always use one drug to get off another drug. You know what I mean? Like, smoke, we drink alcohol, and alcohol was always there to like get off that last one. It was like, all right, this is the last thing, because it's so accessible at that. I got fake IDs, you know what I mean? Like, it's so accessible. You can walk into a grocery store and grab whatever you need, and so at this point I used methamphetamines to get off of heroin. You know what I mean? And so I did, me and my cousin is now my connection with getting speed, and so and we both have $400, you know what I mean? Like, so the next 2 weeks we're covered, you know what I mean? And we just spent the next 2 weeks in that motorhome, getting loaded out of her mind. My cousin he taught me how to use a syringe and a spoon, and I was one of those guys that was like, oh, if I ever get this bad, like, I'll go get help. You know what I mean? Like, and you just, at some point, somebody's just like, hey, try this. You know what I mean? And you're just like, you're already messed up. You're just like, all right, yeah, cool. You do it for me the first time, and then I'll do it the second time. And it's just, that's all it takes. It's just like somebody handing you a cigarette. That's all it took, was somebody like handing me a cigarette and said, this is the best thing that's in sliced bread, and he did that for me. And, I was sitting on the moon that night, and my whole entire world changed. It changed. Like, it was like there was nothing. The love that my mom had, the good times I had with my father, the vacations, the dirt bikes, the toys, the girlfriends, that anything in the world did not compare to this experience that I just partake in, and it changed my life. You know what I mean? And so, I didn't know that you can do that. You can do heroin and speed together. You can do crack and all this stuff. Like, you can just make a mixture of stuff and have it all, and that's what I did for the next years, years.
So what was the turning point for you?
So the turning point is I had a couple of them. So between that, my parents leaving, and probably my 19th birthday, 19, 20, 20th birthday, I caught my first felony, because the best thing that my knowledge was that if you want to do something, and if you want to do it a lot, the best thing to do is try to find somebody that will help you sell it. Because if you sell it, you always have it. People always want to come and hang out with you, and they'll do it with you. You know what I mean? Like, it's always a party if you have what other people want. And so at this point, I'm selling, meth, and so I always have it. And I got caught with, the scale and the baggies and all that stuff like that. And, I get my first experience with Men's Central Jail in California. And it's not as bad as I think it is. You know what I mean? Like, it's not as scary as everybody made it sound to be. They gave me a room. The worst part was detoxing. You know what I mean? Like, you're in there for kicking dope, and you realize that you can get it in there. And, I tried that once, and I'm like up all night long, just thinking, weird stuff, and so it's not fun getting high in there. So, like, I'm like, all right, cool. Well, it's not that bad in here. They gave me 3 meals, you know what I mean? Like, there's running water and showers and stuff like that. It's not as terrifying as what movies make it look out. But then I get out, and I find there was these girls that were in Alateen that I always talked to, and like, they did the same thing I did, as they became the best, drug addicts they possibly could, and we kind of, like, Facebook is just, is a thing then, and so I get on Facebook when I get out, I get a phone and everything like that. And I hit this girl up and I was like, hey, you remember this other girl? And she's like, yeah, like here's her information. Like she said, call her, and so I'm like homeless at this point. I'm living in like the Lancaster homeless shelter, and I'm not thinking anything of it. Like there's like I'm sleeping on cots and rooftops and in abandoned houses, and I'm just thinking that like this is the life. Like I don't have a dollar to my name. I'm using like GR money to like get a little bit of snacks, and I'm not taking the food stamps because who needs food stamps? You gonna give me $200 a month? Cool, that's all I need. You know what I mean? Like I get that when I first get out of jail, and I'm off and running. You know what I mean? Like you give me $200, like I'll try to make it flip. And so I buy everything I need, which is a phone, a little decent sized bag to get me by, you know what I mean? And I'll rob and steal and cheat my way to whatever I need after that, but what happens is I get out and I get a hold of this girl, and she gets me in contact with this other girl who is a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm not aware of, and that's kind of like how the ball started is, dope fiend boy, runs into AA girl on AA campus, and so that's kind of like my intro to Alcoholics Anonymous is this girl wanted to hang out with me, you know what I mean? Like I'm living in an abandoned house at this time. She's dropping me off around the corner because my roommates won't let her come in the house, you know what I mean? Like there's no roommates. There's no electricity. I don't know who owns this house. There's no running water. You know what I mean? Like I'm showering anywhere that I can when I can, and so and she feeds me and drives me around in her car, and probably a great Al-Anon at this point, in her life, and she's young, and so she lets me know like, hey, like I'll hang out with you, like we can hang out when I'm on this side of town, but I'm going to a meeting. Like you should come with me, and at first I'm like, hey, let me just borrow your car. Like I have a driver's license. Like I'll come and pick you up. You just call me and I'll come and get you. So I'm using her car to, make drops and stuff like that, and picking her up from the meeting, taking her out to dinner because I made some money, and barely eating, you know what I mean? Like and then having her drop me off, and I do that a couple of times, and eventually, like I'm like, oh, this is AA. Like you're going to AA meetings, like you actually do that? You're sober? And she's like, yeah, like this is, I have a drinking problem. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like my dad used to go to meetings and da 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 da. And so we started talking about that. And she's like, well, you should come to one. And there was a young people's meeting in Lancaster at that time. And I was like, like I'm stuck up. You know what I mean? Like these people know I'm loaded. Like I haven't stopped getting loaded since I started. You know what I mean? Like that time that I was in rehab with my parents at my parents' house, like best believe like I had a cookie jar full of treasures, you know what I mean, that I was dipping into the whole entire time that I was sober, you know what I mean, for my parents, and yeah, that's life was not good.
So what was it like in the meetings? I mean, it was with the seed planted.
So what it was like when I first came to AA is I knew that you guys had, I was a taker. I knew that you guys had coffee, cigarettes, and hopefully some birthday cake, and it was a safe place away from people that were trying to rob me, people that were trying to beat me up, and I could sleep. And so what I would do is I would sleep on these pews, or I would sleep with my head between my legs, and I'd come there and I would smoke your cigarettes and drink your coffee and listen to you ramble about how bad your life is because you decided to be a quitter, and like I just didn't make sense. I was just like, you guys are quitters. You know what I mean? Like surrender to win. That's not how that works. You know what I mean? Like that's two double negatives. Okay, like it doesn't work that way. Like I was just saying weird stuff like that. I keep coming back. We'll love you until you love yourself. And I was just like, you guys are fools. You know what I mean? Like, who's bringing cake and who's got a marble 100? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to know. And then I ran into this old timer. He was just like, sit down and shut up. Like we know what you have and we don't want it. And I was just like, you ain't getting any of what I have. Okay. Like, unless you got money, you know what I mean? Like, and he was just like, yeah, we have money, but we don't want to buy nothing from you. You know what I mean? Like, this program's free. It's free. You could take all you want from it, Jason, and you would never even touch it. You never even touch it. And that didn't make sense. It made me angry. Made me angry that this guy was talking to me like that. And more than anything, it made me feel less than. And I tried real hard to be a gangster and this person that was like, tough in my skin, and it made me feel real small. And uh, uh, it's not, I didn't like it, but I liked it at the same time where I was just like, oh, like, how dare him? Well, that guy's got some audacity. Yeah. I want some audacity, Yeah, and I was just like, I'm gonna keep coming back. I'm gonna keep coming back to show this guy that I'm not a loser. I'm not a taker. And that became my ultimate like sobriety hack of like just staying sober off of not white knuckling it in the first couple like years of like trying to stay sober, like the 30-60-90, 30-60-90, 30-60-90, to like really like was just spiteful just to show old timers like, oh, you're not gonna make it, because they'd tell you the truth, like you ain't gonna make it, dude. You don't have the willingness or the desperation. And it just make me so mad. And I would be like, even if I get loaded, I'll come back. You know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, do that, Jason. Like they're like reverse psychologying me, and I don't know it. I'm just so sick and not well. And like, you could have asked me like, what's your phone number and what's your street address and who's the president of the United States at that time, and I wouldn't have any idea. I didn't have any knowledge of any of those things. I didn't have an address of where I lived. I was living like I was still homeless when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was sleeping in that camper, and I was riding a mountain bike away from my brother. My brother was living there at that time with his babies, and he didn't want me anywhere near his family because he knew I was a sick drug addict. And so like I respected that. And so I would sneak in there at nighttime because it was the only place I had to lay down that I knew there was a mattress. I didn't have friends. I didn't, like I would use some of that EBT money to like maybe rent a hotel at some point and like take a shower and like sleep in a bed with blankets, and pillows. And I didn't, and I was realizing this stuff as I like got sober for a little while, and eventually that girl let me like talk to her parents, and they're like, hey, he wants to get sober, and like he's my boyfriend, and like we need to help him. You know what I mean? Like he's gonna come live here with us. And her mom and dad, they have like 20 plus years at that time. They're the old timers that are like, hey, you ain't gonna fucking make it. Like you're just chasing my daughter into the rooms. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, like she's gorgeous. I'm saying, why would I not? Like whatever she's doing, like I want to do it too. Like, I don't really have much. I have like a red Razor scooter at the time, and my brother's just like, you're 21 years old and you're riding around town on a Razor scooter, like you're a loser, dude. Like you need to like come to a reality check. And I'm like, oh yeah, like you know, that's the last thing my brother said to me, like when I was getting loaded. So like life is really, really hard, and I don't know what direction to go in. So that's where my life is around, 21, 20, yeah, 21 years old.
So, so you've been introduced. It's not quite taking, right? So what was like what was the final turning point that really made you like the first get in like the first step of recovery?
All right. What was the turning point? So I kept catching court cases going in and out. Like I said, I like to sell drugs, and so I'm not as slick and as smooth and as sneaky when you mix sobriety and relapses, and so like I keep getting caught. You know what I mean? I get like one felony and another felony and a third felony, and I'm going, and eventually I get that young lady pregnant. Um and right before her due date, I have court, and I go to court, and they throw me back in jail. They throw me back in jail for not doing my community service and other stuff that I was supposed to be doing. And you know, and I'm in jail for like the first month. And she put money on my books, and so I'm calling her every single day, talking to her, trying to figure this all out, blah blah blah, poor me, poor me, poor me. And she goes into labor. She goes into labor like a week after me being incarcerated, and I'm sitting in a cell block, and the mother of my child is on the other side of the phone, cussing me up and down the wall. You know, how dare you not be here when I need you? You know what I mean? I'm on the other side crying in a cell with three other dudes. You know what I mean? Like, like the one place you don't want to be vulnerable, I'm vulnerable. And that was the first time that it like clicked in my head. It was like restless, irritable, and discontent. You know what I mean? Like, like this is what that demoralization. This is what they're talking about. That this is that feeling. You know what I mean? And I'm sober at that time when I'm in jail, and I'm just like, dude, what did you do? Like, and thank God they had that prop, 36 or whatever it was going on in California. And so like they were like, oh, you keep getting caught with, drugs and paraphernalia, Jason. Like, do you want to do a treatment program? You're either going to do a treatment program or we're going to do that for a couple of years. Uh, you know, and so I'm like, yeah, let's go to rehab. You know what I mean? It was the first time, and I went to a place called Acton Rehab, and God bless that place. You know what I mean? I don't think it exists anymore. But that place saved my life. I met a guy in county jail that last time, and his name was Anthony. He's still sober to this day. I mean, he's got more time than I did because I did relapse a couple of times since going into that rehab, and he didn't. You know what I mean? Like he was tattooed from head to toe. You know what I mean? Spent multiple years in prison. He like sat down every single day I was in there, and like he had like an AA big book and like all this literature. And he was just like, oh, you've been to meetings outside? Like, I never have. I came from prison to like county jail. Like, please tell me what to do. And I'm like, what do you mean, dude? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm in here with you, bro. Like, we're both in trouble. And he's like, well, I'm going to try to get like a program. Like I'm done. Like, I've spent 16 years in the system. Like, he's like, I want to live life. He's like, I live in Hermosa Beach. He's like one of the most beautiful places in the United States. You know what I mean? Like, and like, I've just been getting loaded the whole entire time. Like, I don't even know how to surf. And I'm like, I lived by the beach my whole life, and I'm like thinking that like, oh wow, like this guy's for real. He's like, tell me about this Prop 36 thing. Like, picks my brain about everything. And so he comes a week after I am in this rehab, and I'm like, all right, cool. And so he teaches me all the stuff he knows about lifting weights. And they do 12-step programs. So like they're helping you go through like packets of AA literature that like have questionnaires, and at nighttime they're bringing in H&I speakers for NA and AA. And so we're bouncing back and forth, and we become, secretaries, and like, I'm like doing AA. And then I'm like, my father-in-law, who her dad is coming in on panels and bringing me cigarettes and like money for the payphone to be able to call her. They're feeding us very well, so we're getting healthy and strong. And I'm falling in love with AA. And then they because we were participating so much in our sobriety, they allowed us to go to the AA convention that was in Lancaster for the week, which was like awesome. You know what I mean? It was like good speaker meetings, banquets. They let us dress up and like get all fancy, you know what I mean? Do all the banquet dinners and stuff like that. But in the meantime, like you gotta think like I spent 3 months in county jail with my son being born. Never seen my kid. And then I spent 2 months before I got visitation for me to be able to even touch my kid. So 5 months I didn't even know what my son looked like. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know, I didn't ever touched him. You know what I mean? Like she drove up to the gate and I ran up there real quick and she was like, "This is your son." And like I started crying and I was just like, "I can't do this right now." You know what I mean? Like, um, and so like I was like, "I can't do this." Like I'm freaking out, like that I'm in this outdoor cage and you're on the other side and like I want to leave. You know what I mean? I was like, "You can't do this." Like, and even my counselor at that time was like, "You can't do it that way. Like, you got to wait until he can get like clarity of the mind, and like, I'm so sick that like, I don't even realize like, this is how bad, like, I realized addiction is like, I got like 4 tattoos on one of my arm. I never even knew that I had tattoos. Like, I was so full flight from reality that I didn't know that I had tattoos on my body that are horrible. They're not pieces of art. They were not, okay to look at. I don't know who or what tattooed me. Like they were not okay. It looked like I got doodled on by somebody that just is a professional doodler. You know what I mean? Like it was not
Does,
okay.
does one of them say no regrets? That's all I
No,
need to
no, but I think one of them was like it's a rabbit who lost his arm, who's got like a peg leg. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is. It was like that one and the other one on the other side. It was like, I don't know. It's a lucky rabbit's foot. They're like the only ones I could salvage. The other one, like I had to cover it up. It was just like a skull with a melting face with like dirt bike gears on the back of it, but it did not look like the lines are there's still lines that are so shaky because I haven't had it filled in completely. You know what I mean? That are just like, like I'm pretty sure my dope dealer was tattooing me while we were like smoking, speed at the same time. Like he doesn't have gloves on. I'm hitting the pookie. You know what I mean? Like just disgusting stuff. You know what I mean? Like who cares? You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to live to see 30 years old. I'm not. That's not my goal. Is to be like my dad. Like it's no longer that. It's I want to live fast and loud. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I thought was cool. You know, I didn't really know that I was being tricked by the narcotics that I was taking and the drinks that I was taking. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know I was being fooled. And that's really what was happening is there was a veil over my eyes of like what life was really about.
We are delusional. That's for sure. We are definitely delusional. So what happened on August 13th, 2015?
So prior to that, I started that young people's meeting at my house. Um, because I just was having a hard time like clicking. My dad died. Dad died a couple of months before that. Well, he died the year before that in November. November, no, December. He passed away at the beginning of December, and my son's about 2 years old at that point. You know what I mean? Like we're up in Oregon with my mom and dad at my mom and dad's house. My dad does have these things called fentanyl patches. They're like 72-hour patches that you stick on your body when you're in pain. And I find boxes of them and I eat all of them. And so, yeah, I had a year prior to that and I eat all of them, and I just make a fool of myself, you know what I mean? Because I don't know how to express my emotions, and so my wife leaves me at that time. She takes the baby and she's like, "I'm fucking out of here. Like, I'm not dealing with this shit. And so he drives back down. My brother comes up, my brother gets me, halfway sober and, gets my mind back to normal a little bit, and we pack up his car and we drive back home together and he drops me off and, and I get back into the program, and I'm doing that whole entire, like, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like for a year of 2014. And but I know I have to stay sober for my kid because my dad stayed sober for me as a kid, and so just white knuckling it. And then, I had this sponsor at the time named Mark, and he was just like, if you don't like AA so much, like, why don't you go make a meeting? He's like, you seem very resentful at the meetings that you go to. Like, if you think you can do a better job, go do it. All you need is a resentment and a coffee pot, Jason, and some literature and a big book. Like, you can do it. And I was like, F you. All right. All right. You know what I mean? And I knew enough young people at this point, like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I got some chairs. And I knew a contractor. He was a framer, and he came over and built a fire pit in this yard. My mom and my dad let me rent that house that I was constantly robbing out of. That was kind of like their thing. When whoever one of their kids wanted to rent the house, they could. You know what I mean? If you had your life together, it's yours. It's there. You know what I mean? Like, I was working at that time. And I was, and so I'm renting that house, and it's on like an acre and a half, and it's on this dirt neighborhood. So like all my neighbors know who I am, and I know who they are. And so I built this fire pit, and I print out these flyers of, BYOC, bring your own chair, because bring your own beer was like a thing back then, and so, we would barbecue. Like I got some money, and I bought hamburgers and hot dogs, and, some soda pops full of a cooler, full of that stuff. And, for an hour before that meeting, we would barbecue, and we would just chop it up, you know what I mean? And then we'd start a bonfire meeting, and we would have a bonfire, and watch those California sunsets. And we would just talk and have an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what was happening is we were creating these relationships with one another, and after the meeting, like we would go bowling, we'd go shoot like pool, and we would go to Denny's and go out to dinner afterwards, and we would do things, and while my kids growing up, like all these other young people are bringing their children, and, daughters are watching sons, and sons are watching daughters, you know what I mean? And our kids are growing up with each other, and it's just this amazing thing, this amazing fellowship that was it was exactly what I needed. It was exactly what I needed to fall in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. And eventually I found one of those guys that I trusted. I finally started to trust members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I found a guy in there. His name is Kevin, and he was the first guy that I went through all 12 steps with, you know what I mean? And I was like completely honest with, and that changed my whole entire life. It changed my whole entire life. Not only just doing the 12 steps, but like being able to trust somebody enough to tell them all of that dirt that people think is so important to carry and hide from other people. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not. We think that we're so special and so, independent and so, one of a kind. And it's like, at the end of it, he was like, "Oh man, that's cool. Like you done half the shit I did." I was like, "Oh, yeah, man."
I always think like, recovery is full of a bunch of people who are very unique with the same problem.
Absolutely.
We all think we're unique.
Yeah.
So what was it that changed? I mean, I know that the meeting was something helped change your perspective. Was there other things, the 12 steps, of course? What else changed your perspective about recovery?
What else changed my perspective about recovery? So at that point, like I don't really know how to be a man. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a son. I don't know how to be a brother. I don't know how to do anything but stay sober. Like that's the one thing in my life that I'm trying to do consistently, and so like I'm getting commitments. I'm, cleaning up coffee, baking cakes, getting stuff from grocery stores, every commitment you can possibly think of in Alcoholics Anonymous, except for GSR. I don't do that. Yeah. I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm trying to be of maximum service. You know what I mean? I'm doing H&I panels, and I'm just participating. I'm trying to stay in the middle of the herd and do this because I don't know what else to do. Like drugs and alcohol were my whole entire life. Everything, like from the time I woke up, to the time I passed out, like it was about getting loaded. And so when I came into AA, they told me I had to get rid of everybody I knew. All people, places, and things have to be let go. And I did that. I didn't have anybody. My dad was the only member of Alcoholics Anonymous in my house. He's dead. You know what I mean? Like her parents, kind of like me, but don't think that I'm gonna stay sober. And like I'm building a relationship with her father. But still, like I'm in my first year, and they're thinking that I'm still a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and I am. You know what I mean? Like I am. You know what I mean? Like that's who I am until I'm not, and that's because of a direct result of the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I just dive into everything that you possibly can do in AA. Like if I'm not at work, I'm in a meeting. If I'm not in a meeting, I'm with a member of Alcoholics Anonymous doing some kind of work for or with a meeting involved. And my life becomes rich and meaningful. I start to be a better son. I start to become a better husband. I start to become a better brother. I start to become a better friend. My life is becoming rich and meaningful. And the promises are coming into my life. Are happening for me. Life is good. Life is good. And eventually, me and that wife, she wants to go and get loaded once again, and we had to like kind of separate, and that was kind of like the end of our marriage. Was like, oh, you're gonna go this way, and I'm gonna go this way, and where she's chosen to be for the last 12 years is over on that side. I don't judge her for it. You know what I mean? Like if it works, it works. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me anymore. And it's not that it stopped working. It's that the consequences for getting loaded became so severe that I didn't have the funds to pay for them. I was paying in flesh and time. And I didn't want to give up any more time. Like my last court case that I had was over 12 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, and it was a 5-year joint suspension. You know what I mean? Like, and I was facing prison time, and I was just like, I don't want to go to prison. Like, I can't be away from my kid that long. Like, and I don't want to experience that. I don't want to, like, going to county jail was one thing of like being able to be like, okay, I'll be gone for a couple of months. You know what I mean? But be gone for a couple of years? Like, no, no, man. I like hamburgers and girls and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I like fresh water and being able to do whatever the fuck I want. A door that covers my bathroom, so when I'm going potty, people can't see me. Privacy. Those are things I cherish today. So but so we separated. That was pretty hard. You know what I mean? Like, but I did it. I did it with the members of Alcoholics Anonymous behind me. You know what I mean? With those members from that young people meeting walking with me. I had to ask women in AA, like, how do I be a better boyfriend? You know what I mean? How do I be a better son? You know what I mean? And they would tell me, like, hang out with your mom. Treat women the way you would want a man to treat your mom. And treat her that way. You do it. Take your mom on a date, buy her flowers, do these things, and train yourself to be this way for your mom. Because your mom doesn't have a husband anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and you get to be a man of the house for her. And eventually she moved back down to California into that house with me. You know what I mean? Because it was getting real rough for me to be able to raise this kid. Baby mama was getting loaded, like on hardcore drugs at this time. So I'm like a real, single dad. I'm dropping him off in the morning time with grandma, her parents, and then I'm picking him up, around 4 o'clock. And what I do though, is I do what AA's told me to do is I find something that's super important and I hyper focus on it and I build my life around that. And so I start working for contractors that are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and those people are very loving and kind, and they understand that, like, hey, I'm a single dad. Like, I need to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I need to leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to go, be with my kid. You know what I mean? Like, it's not negotiable, and I'll work and I'll bend over backwards as much as you want me to do. You know what I mean? And so I would just became the best employee I possibly can. And I would ask these things in return because I knew I needed to be responsible for that little kid. You know what I mean? Like, and that was my whole entire world, you know? And so my life revolved around Alcoholics Anonymous. And I would bring that little boy in his car seat and I would stick him underneath that pew of those meetings. And he would sleep the whole entire time. And he was the best baby, best little kid. You know what I mean? Like the meetings loved him. He didn't cry. He didn't do any things like that. He was the complete opposite of me. He's been the complete opposite of me. He's been a daily reminder that God exists by his grace. You know what I mean? And because like I don't know where I would be and what I would be doing if he was anything like me. You know what I mean? Like I was not a helpful, kind, and considerate child. You know what I mean? I knew that negative attention was better than no attention. You know what I mean? And my son's not that way. You know, and I don't know if that's a direct result of God or AA, but I don't want it to stop. So I could continue to keep doing the same things that I've done from the beginning. You know, and so that's kind of like what happened and where I'm at right now. Yeah.
When you meant it's like I always think of there's that saying that says, God brought us to AA and AA brought us to God.
Absolutely.
It kind of reminds me of that. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is like with what does staying in God's will mean to you? Because I know you mentioned.
So I try to think of God's will like a river, and river's flowing. It's got its own direction, you know, and when I'm going against God's will, it's like walking up that river, you know, and I try to remember that in what I'm doing throughout the day, you know, and am I going with the river or am I going against it? And it's really hard as a young person in Alcoholics Anonymous and a young person in life to find to know what that is. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the most challenging things I've had to deal with while being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is knowing and accepting God's will over mine. You know what I mean? Like not even just doing what he wants all the time, but like accepting that, you know what I mean? To find acceptance in that. You know what I mean? Like, but what I try to remember is that if I surrender, I win. You know what I mean? And I didn't believe it in the beginning. You surrender to win, you know what I mean? But it's truly like the discipline of being able to surrender on a daily basis of like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been this old. I've never been this sober. I've never been a father this long. I've never been an employee this long. I have no idea what to do. And that's the honest to God truth. You know what I mean? Like I'm 36 years old today. I've never been this old. I know what it looks like to be 35, but I don't know what it looks like to be 36. Like I might win a lottery ticket or a jackpot next week. Who knows? You know, my whole entire life might change. I might die tomorrow. Like, I don't know. And so like for me to sit here and surrender and go, you know, like God's will is for me to Joe asked me to be on this podcast, so I need to make sure that I'm on this podcast because I made a commitment and I'm disciplined enough to show up for that. And that's how I have a relationship with God. Is my God and me have like a very direct forward. Like I need to be cut clear directions. Like I'm not that smart and you need to be that blunt. You know what I mean? Like I don't want a sign. I want you to tell me. You know what I mean? Like make it clear with periods, dot the I's, cross the T's, make it so I see. You know what I mean? Like don't put a sign in front of me, hit me with it. You know what I mean? Like I don't play that like, oh, you know, he's giving you all these signs. Like, no, you need to smack me on the head with it. You know what I mean? Like I learned from falling down. My whole entire life, it was about getting hurt. And I'm willing to get hurt. Like I'll take the scar if that's how I learn the direction, you know, and that's the kind of relationship I have with, you know, a God of my own understanding that I've got from Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what I mean? Like my dad was a Catholic, you know, he believed in the fire, brimstone, God, you know, and AA taught him to have a God that was loving. My mom has always been like a Christian who has shown us a loving God. and tried to teach us. My mom was one of my biggest, godly heroes in my life. And she constantly helps me with learning God's word and uh, trying to have a stronger relationship with the God that I have today, and I'm grateful for that. The amount of teachers I have in my life are amazing today. Yeah.
Yeah, it tells us we are undisciplined, so we ask God to discipline us. Um, but made me think, your story too. You've kind of come full circle from, your dad having guys in there, in when you're growing up, he's got, one day dedicated to these guys he's helping, and you did the same thing. You had a meeting started a young people's meeting at your house, and I know you work with guys today. I mean,
Yeah,
it's got to be kind of cool to have a better understanding of what your father was doing at that time.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool. But man, thank you so much for sharing your story, Jason.
You're very welcome, Joe, man.
Yeah.
It's been an honor and a privilege, and hopefully it helps somebody to kind of relate. I owe the life I have to Alcoholics Anonymous and the God that they gave me, and I don't, like they always say, like, you can't repay that stuff. You can try, we can all try. We just try our best every single day to do the next indicated step, to practice these principles in all of our affairs, and that's hard. It's hard to do that in this world, you know what I mean? Like, this world is not an easy place to be in, you know what I mean? It's not simple, you know what I mean? Like, like they always say, it's a simple program for complicated people. You know what I mean? Like, my life is still, in my head, is still complicated. Even with the 10 years that I have, like, it's still hard. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like, how to function. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I use the tools that I've been given, though, is like, stay connected. I mean, use Alcoholics Anonymous, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. You know what I mean? Like, no question is a dumb question. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't know, ask. You know what I mean? People want to help. People want to teach you. And that is learning to be humble and humility at the same time. You know what I mean? Is not knowing that I don't know. Is the first part of knowing that, like, I need to get in the right headspace.
Yeah. No, it's the powerful thing to be able to ask for help,
Absolutely.
and ask that. So, well, I can't let you go without doing our rapid fire questions. I know you've been waiting all day. So are you ready, sir?
I'm ready.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
Rule 62, don't take yourself so seriously.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Think, think, think.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Um, I'm a giver. So, like, if you called me and you needed me, I try to make it happen no matter what.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Don't give up.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Uh-huh. Pink Pony Club.
If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
Um, I don't know. I want to change anything in my recovery. It was perfect exactly the way it was.
What step do you love the most?
I love the third step.
What step do you love the least?
Um, Probably 8.
What is one of your favorite movies?
Favorite movies? I like Dodgeball.
And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Holy shit, you made it.
Nice. Thank you so much, Jason.
You're welcome, Joe. I hope you have a
Appreciate
great
you, man.
weekend, man.
You too, brother. And for the rest of you out there, if this episode meant something to you, please share it with one person who needs some hope today. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review. It helps this message reach someone who's still struggling and doesn't know where to turn. A new episode of The Cup of Joe Show drops every Thursday at noon. You can listen anytime at thecupofjoeshow.net or on any of your favorite podcast apps, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." And if you're looking for daily encouragement in your recovery journey, subscribe to our friends at thedailyponderables.com. They come straight to your inbox every morning. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share because someone out there needs to hear this today. Have a good day, everybody.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.